yes, there's nothing quite like taking a drive in a tuna can with some windows on one of the hottest days of the year. No aircon in this thing. Yes, it is the Renault 5 GT Turbo. 32 years old now, this thing. And 32 years ago, aircon wasn't an option that you could easily tick on most cars. Indeed, it was one of those luxury items. What? Mr. Jones at 54 has got aircon in his car? I can't believe it. In this video, I want to talk about this car, what it's like to drive today, the driving experience of this 32-year-old car. Has it stood the test of time? Does it still stand up to the cars that we've got today, that we've been completely spoilt with, just in terms of technology and that relentless march of R&D to make them better and better and continually improve them? And I've had to come out a little bit later in the evening for this video, so excuse me if the exposure's all a bit off and what have you, but we'll make the best of it and have a little bit of a conversation about this car. So, first thing is where to start, and I think we've got to talk about the build quality. Now, when I used to get out in these cars back in the day, the build quality to me seemed okay-ish. But then, of course, over the years, you get spoilt with all these very nice, heavy, well-put-together cars. The German cars, Fords, etc. Just things that are generally pretty well built these days. And then you get back in one of these, and you think, yeah, things have changed. Things really have changed, because this now is a little bit bumpy, a little bit shaky. And the cars back in the day, they all had modified alloys with really thin rubber bands on them, so the ride quality back then was pretty firm. But I have to admit, the ride in this isn't too bad. It's got the original Speedline alloys on 13-inch on thick Uniroyal tyres, so it's not too bad over the bumps. But what you do notice is all the shakes, the dash creaks, the exhaust rattling a little bit, a few knocking noises here and there, and some mystery bonus noises thrown in for good measure. But you can still hear the engine. That still sounds great, even though it's been modified a little bit for reliability. But starting with the build quality and the ride quality, that's the topic we're on now. And honestly, it's not too bad for a car of this age, really. I mean, you've got to give it its dues. It's an older car. It's probably been rattled around a bit quite a lot over its life, and the fact that everything is kind of still pretty much screwed in and generally working isn't too bad. The next thing you notice in one of these is, of course, the steering. You need a workout to get this thing up the road, because, of course, no power steering in this at all. It's just you connected directly to the front wheels, and yeah, it's pretty heavy, and you feel it when you're going round the bend. And don't even think about trying to move the wheel when you're stationary. Oh no, don't even try and do that. You've got to be moving to move it. And if all you've ever known is power steering, and you get in a car without it, you're going to have a tough time. It's like a go-kart. That really takes it out of you. But it kind of adds to that enjoyment, right? So we've spoken about the build quality, the steering. I'd say it's pretty well connected. If you're going around a bend a little bit too fast, just keep the power in, keep it turned in. It's front wheel drive, front wheel steering, engine in the front, all the weight's over the front. And they make pretty good kind of rally cars for that reason. You just chuck them about, right? So straight line speed, 1.4, 120 brake in a car that weighs 800 kilos. I mean, it goes, but again, you know, if you were to get in a Golf Type R these days, even a GTI, there probably wouldn't be much comparison. But the way this goes about getting to 60 miles an hour and 100 and 120 if you're really pushing it is fun, no doubt. How does it manage down the motorway? Well, pretty good. I mean, you're probably going to be sitting at about 3.5, 4,000 RPM in fifth. And that's the next topic here, the gears. So the gears are interesting. The gear lever explores explores a continental range of different areas before sort of connecting. So you've got to kind of feel around a bit. It's a bit loose, and when you get into something that really clicks in, I remember when I first got into my Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 6, the gears in that was like, wow, this is amazing. Click, 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 really short throw gear stick. This is loose and floppy, but again, it's just part of that experience, it's part of the car. So 5-speed gearbox on this, hook it up and left to get it back into reverse. And yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, it does the car justice. That 1.4 engine, you know, pretty reliable by the grand scheme of things. They don't like getting hot, so driving experiences generally, or the premise here is to keep them moving. They don't like being stuck in traffic. I had one overheat on me in traffic because the radiator fan was not kicking in. Very common fault on these. You just got to be very sort of vigilant when you're driving them. Keep your nose about you. Does it smell like it's getting a bit hot? If it is, pull over, give it a rest, turn it off, let it just sit there and cool down, because they, as I say, renowned for overheating. Of course, carburetor, no injection in this. Getting a carburetor to work properly is an art that only the wizards of Harry Potter know in depth. And then, of course, the mod cons of this car. Well, there isn't any, right? The fan speed, it's a 3-speed fan with 3 settings, the first of which is mosquito breath and the last of which is chain-smoking chipmunk. It's almost pointless, the fan in this, doesn't really do anything at all, hence having the window open and this mic on, so hopefully you can hear me and there isn't too much wind noise on this. Fingers crossed, probably a little bit blowing in there. Let me slide that down a little bit. But yeah, hopefully not too bad. It does have electric windows, which for this car are probably its biggest downfall because they are notoriously unreliable and do fail quite often. So I've known some people to actually convert them to windy windows in the name of reliability, which is, I guess, totally understandable, really. But yeah, the mod cons don't exist. The radio is an FM radio with cassette, CD, doesn't really work very well. Then, of course, brakes. Well, it's disc brakes all around in this, and they're pretty good, the brakes. Got to stamp on them a little bit to get them to work, but yeah, discs all round, which is pretty good for a car. I mean, the standard Renault 5 had drums on the rear, so yeah, I guess I've got no complaints there. And do excuse the exposure here, it's all over the shop. That low sun never helps for a bit of filming, right? So the reality is, if you're looking to experience one of these, there's not that many left, as I've said in previous videos. If you're hankering after one, now's probably the time to get on board, because the values just seem to be going up and up. I think they've doubled pretty much in the past year or so, which is bonkers. But yeah, I really do think that there's still a pretty decent investment if you can find a good one, because, as I say, it just becomes harder and harder to enjoy that petrol ownership experience these days. But seriously, I mean, I have to say, I just thoroughly enjoy this car in terms of the way it drives, the fun you can have in it, and just the thrill and sound of it, the rawness of it. Nothing else quite like it, really. It still pulls as well. It really does pull. And you can smell it when you do that. You just smell the engine. Yeah, it's good. It's a great car. It really is. One of my favourite things about it is the fact that it's turbocharged with a lot of lag, and it makes all of these interesting noises. Now, the thing to do back in the day was to put a dump valve on these, so you get that kind of whoosh after every gear change or every time you come off the throttle. Of course, the thing to do with these cars in these days is obviously to try and keep them as standard as possible, so that they command the best value and are really true to the original. I think people kind of look down a little bit on cars that have been too heavily tweaked with and played around with these days. So I think the reality here is that we've just got to accept that it should be as standard as possible and try and keep it that way. This one's got an aftermarket air filter on it, and you can kind of hear it just giving that little chirpy, tweedy sound as you change gear, that turbo stall, which is a great sound. But I don't know, there's just something fun about an old car like this, the kind of character that it has. So I think we've kind of covered it. The driving experience, to summarize it, I guess it's just fun. It really is fun. The way it kind of just, you can just chuck it around, and obviously, you know, like to look after it because it is old, but yeah, it's an awful lot of fun, and I thoroughly recommend it if you get the chance to get in one. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. See you on the next one.